Great. Jeffrey, thank you for joining me today.
It is such a pleasure. I'm glad you invited me. So we have a lot to talk about.
We do indeed. We're two NDE people. First off, I want to say how much I loved this book.
Well, I'm glad it was meaningful and inspirational.
Very much so.
Well, that's great. Yep.
Since I had an NDE, my life has changed, and how I view the world has changed. So that I'd love to talk to you, being one of the leading experts in NDE. I'd love to chat to you about first of all, how you got involved.
Sure. Many decades ago, I was in my residency training. Now, I'm a physician. My medical specialty is radiation oncology, which is the use of radiation to treat cancer. This was so many decades ago. We didn't even have internet. So when you wanted to read an article, instead of looking it up online, you had to go to the library. And there were these big old thick bound volumes. And I was going through the Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the world's leading medical journals, flipping through for my cancer related article. And completely by accident, there was an article that had in the title, near-death experience. Now, I'd never heard that before. And I was intrigued. I mean, how can you not be interested in, what happens after you die? And here was an article suggesting. So I read it and was immediately fascinated. A cardiologist, a physician, had written an article about how in his research, people had their consciousness separate from their body during near-death experiences, and they were amazingly accurate in what they could see and recall during their near-death experience, even while they were clinically dead. So I immediately recognized that if this was true, near-death experience was real, this completely changed my view of the universe, and there was something bigger going on. So I read some of the bibliographical information and was just fascinated. But I was in my residency and didn't have time to pursue it. Now, several years later, I had a college friend visiting me in town with his wife. And over dinner, she mentioned that she had allergies so severe that at one point she was under surgery and coded due to an allergy. That means her heart stopped. And she said it funny, and look, she didn't say any more, but my medical instinct said, there's more going on here, I think. So I just asked her, well, did something happen after you coded while you were under general anesthesia? Now, mind you, that should be the stupidest question a doctor could have asked, but I did anyway. And she said, why, yes, something happened. And went on to share the first near-death experience I ever heard. Doozy, out-of-body experience, tunnel, lights, life review, meeting deceased loved ones. But she didn't know what the experience was. So I told her I read about it a couple years ago and shared her the article. But right at that point, I went, wow, what's going on? So then several years later, I developed the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation website, NDERF, mainly because I was interested. I wanted to get the first-person information from people that had these experiences so I could answer that burning question, are near-death experiences for real? Well, now that I've received over 3,500 near-death experiences on that research website, unequivocally, I've answered my own question. Near-death experiences are, in a word, real.
Wow, great story. When I had my near-death experience, the context was I was in hospital, having treatment actually for brain cancer, which I was told was inoperable, and statistically, I was more than likely to die within the next 3 weeks. So it was a very close call with death. And I felt that my spirit, if you like, or me, whoever I am, go up and out. And I didn't really tell anyone, Jeffrey, because I thought I was already quite nuts. I was very manic and talking very fast, and kept telling everyone everything was going to be okay. I'm going to get through this. And they clearly thought I was nuts. And to then tell them that I had left my body and had this incredible experience of visiting a different place than my normal realms, it led me to feel a bit uncomfortable and strange about sharing my story. And indeed, it's only now, 3 years later, when I'm actually writing a book and a film is being made about this, that I feel comfortable to talk about it. What have you found in this, with this respect, of people talking about their experience?
Oh, it's not at all unusual for people to share their near-death experience for a lot of reasons. As you know full well, Susie, it's so unearthly And so unlike any of our earthly experiences, when you share it with anybody, that it's hard for people to really grasp that that's possible. I mean, there are other people when you share these unworldly experiences with are, is it a dream? Is it a hallucination? Are they making it up? So those are the more common things that people think about. Thank goodness you've got the courage to share, and thousands of other people. So people know that these near-death experiences are not dreams, hallucinations made up. They're absolutely real, or even more real than real experiences that open up a window in terms of some understanding and some greater consciousness, a connection that we have, something that is absolutely remarkable, and certainly very much a part of the mainstream scientific investigation. In fact, there's been way over 200 scholarly articles written in some of the world's leading medical journals regarding near-death experience. So it's recognized as a very real phenomenon.
And a lot of doctors, I mean, as yourself being in a professional, it has extra credibility, of course, when doctors begin to investigate it and researchers begin to investigate it, and it becomes a little more real for people. I remember when we were looking at my brain scans, I was at Cambridge University Hospital in England, and I remember the doctor looking at my scan and seeing it was the third one of a succession. The first one was particularly awful, and they said, you really don't have much of a chance here. Second one, it had shrunk, and the third one, it was completely clear. And I remember vividly, and I recorded it on my phone when the doctor said to me, we don't really understand this, and it looks like a miracle to me. We are not in the business of miracles here as doctors, usually. And I said, that's funny, because I am in the business of miracles. You know, I've been praying for one. And indeed, so from a medical point of view, it looked like a miracle.
Well, you were receiving treatment, I believe, weren't you, Susie?
Yeah.
And that, okay, so yeah, and that, you know, it's.
May I add, Jeffrey, he said it's strange because there's no scar tissue. There was absolutely, we would expect severe scar tissue given what we had seen in the previous scans. This one is completely clear.
Yeah, that's incredible. You know, it's you know, and I'm delighted, and may I add, medically speaking, I mean, here's something that was involving your brain. It was severe. It was considered life-threatening, if not close to incurable. And here you are talking today, obviously, you know, no obvious brain damage, and in spite of all that, aggressive treatment for it. And look at you here today. You're doing, this is just, it's very, very fortunate. And you know, I think when you hear about remarkable stories like this, I think miracle is not too strong of a word. I use miracle very sparingly, but listen to what you're sharing. I think that, you know, the best word to describe your amazing recovery and lack of scar tissue and doing so well in life today, miracles comes to mind first.
Incredible. Jeffrey, I feel like giving you a big hug for saying that. Thank you. Because sometimes things happen in life and we just take them on and go, yeah, and move on and move on. With this one, it's such a big storyline. I'm currently writing this book called I Lost My Mind, where I'm writing about this incredible thing that's happened to me. And I know that this will always be a very extraordinary happening in my life. I'm not sure I can always put a context of complete understanding around it. I admit I do not have a rational understanding of this, but what has been very helpful is reading books like yours, Evidence of the Afterlife. In this book, Jeffrey puts down 12 commonalities of people who experience NDEs. And you write about, I'd like to discuss some of these and love to hear from you about them. So for example, people having a life review. Right. Could you speak about that?
Sure. Around 20% of people that have a near-death experience describe a life review. That's where they see a part or even all of their prior life. The life review setting is variably described, but a fairly common setting is they say they may see parts of their life like flashing on a screen. And it can either go sequentially or it can skip around events in the life. And a minority of times that there's a life review, they see actually seemingly every prior event in their life. Now, I found that absolute, first of all, I think an important point is this shows the amazing acceleration of consciousness that's commonly seen in near-death experience. I mean, imagine reviewing your entire life during the minutes, typically well under an hour, that you're unconscious or clinically dead during a near-death experience. And yet here are these people aware of everything that happened in their prior life. The scientist in me said, gee, is there any reason to doubt that those are what they're seeing in their life review is real? And almost uniformly, if someone goes back and checks what they saw in their life review, typically when they were like toddlers or very early in life, that they had long forgotten, if they check it out, typically with their parents, almost invariably what they saw in their life review was accurate down to the finest detail, even if they'd long forgotten about it. So life reviews are, once again, one of the important parts of the string of evidence pointing to the concluding that near-death experiences are absolutely real. Now, a fascinating subset of near-death experiences are the so-called panoramic near-death experiences, where they're not only seeing how they interacted with other people, but they're actually feeling and understanding what that other person felt like while they were interacting with them during their prior life, which is absolutely incredible. And once again, there's often some surprises in this life review. People may not be thinking, well, here's an example because it's so dang cute. For instance, for an example of that, during a life review, this lady saw herself as a 3-year-old child. She was having a bath, and her father came home, and she thought it would be great fun to jump out of the bathtub and go running through the house, spraying water everywhere, laughing. That was her prior life remembrance. But during this panoramic life review, she saw it from her father's perspective. He was not enjoying this at all. He was exhausted after a tough day of work and was quite unhappy and not having near the level of fun she was, as father chased her through the house naked, getting out of the bathtub. So just a sort of a cute little example out of a myriad of these types of examples that have been described. So life reviews, and certainly life reviews can be one of the most transformative parts of a near-death experience. In other words, people really vividly become aware of how they lived their life and how it impacted others. I want to quickly add, while I'm on the topic of life reviews, perhaps the very first talk I gave in public about my book and talked about life reviews, it looked funny. The audience was looked nervous. Some of the, and I guess you're going, okay, did I not say this right? Was I unclear? This is weird. It was only after my talk that some people lined up and started asking questions that I figured out what the problem was. There were some folks who asked basically the context of, Dr. Long, what if I have a life review and it's unpleasant? I've done some things I'm not proud of. And so immediately after all other talks I ever gave, I quickly added that essentially never in a life review is there external judgment. If there's any judgments about your prior life, what you've seen, what you did, your prior life, you do it as an individual, and nothing externally is going to pass any judgment. So all of a sudden, people were much happier when I talked about life reviews after that. So they were much less afraid of having a life review. In reality, I mean, it's very life-changing, very positively life-changing as people come to recognize how deeply their even simple interactions with other people can have significant effects in a very positive way.
So where are we medically on having any explanations for how this extraordinary flicker book, if you like, of life happens? Do we have any sense of that from a sort of medical perspective? Or not medical, but psychological perspective?
Psychological, right. I have spent a mammoth amount of time looking at all possible explanations of near-death experience. I can pretty much say, if you mention any psychological, physiological, or cultural explanation that you've heard of, I've probably heard of it too and spent a lot of time thinking about it, investigating and writing it. These are the so-called, if you will, skeptical explanations. In other words, they believe near-death experiences must be in the physical brain and cannot possibly be due to some non-physical expression of consciousness that we all have, because that's just too difficult for a lot of physician scientists. Well, the bottom line is, I'm here to tell you that over 20 skeptical explanations have been proposed over many years. Now, the reason there's so many of these skeptical explanations of near-death experience floating around is that no one or several of these explanations make any sense at all, even to the skeptics as a group themselves. I mean, think about it. If you had one or several psychological, cultural, physiologic explanations of why near-death experiences work, you wouldn't need dang 20 and more seemingly occurring every few years. The bottom line is, skeptics don't have any explanation at all for what occurs during a near-death experience, let alone the totality of everything observed in a near-death experience, such as, to name one out of many examples, the life review.
Wow, goodness me.
Mhm.
One of the things that I experienced very noticeably was when I came back in my body, I had no fear. And this is something that is often spoken about. Again, I'm interested to ask you about that. What have you found regarding this?
It was that a fear of death or just fear in general?
Just fear in general. I couldn't
Fear in
find
general.
fear. I was at peace with everything.
I think that's an example of a very classic change that occurs. From your perspective, this, you faced what for many people would be the ultimate challenge, the ultimate threat in their life, that being a life-threatening event. It was likely that you would die. And yet you overcame that and went on living, and probably better than ever. So it's not surprising as people, they're called after effects. Those are the typical changes that occur following a near-death experience. And it's fairly common for people to have after effects of feeling more loving, more compassionate. And certainly one survey question I asked 834 near-death experiencers in our survey is about their level of fear of death at the time they had, around the time they had their near-death experience, and then their level of fear of death at the time they shared their near-death experience, averaging about 15 years later. There is an astounding reduction in the level of fear of death that near-death experiencers have following their near-death experience. And that's certainly sort of a core fear that a lot of us have. And so, here it is. And of course, that's not surprising now, is that you should know that, because from people that have a near-death experience's point of view, they know death isn't to be feared. They know what lies beyond death's door, and they know that it's wonderful.
It's
and
pretty wonderful. It's pretty
Afterlife,
beautiful.
yeah, very, very peaceful. All the fears, misery, anxieties, all that junk that we have down here are essentially unknown in the afterlife. So, of course, near-death experiencers, not from taking it on faith, not from listening to other people's experience, but from their own personal experience, most importantly, know darn good and well that the afterlife, a wonderful afterlife, is there for all of us.
Yes, indeed. And, when people say to me, oh, so I think, I've just lost someone or they've passed, I think to myself, well, bless them. And they're at peace. They're happy. This is great. I mean, it's very difficult. I've learned that I have to be very careful with the way I frame things to other people, so it doesn't seem inhumane. But for me, my own life and my own death and others who I love, I can bless that passing, because I feel like I have an experience of the fact that for me it's a beautiful experience. I was asked, I remember the sense of being asked, would I like to return? I had to make a choice about whether to come back or whether to stay. And I am the mum of a teenager. And I of course, from just solely being a mum, I said, yeah, I really want to come back. And I did come back into my body. This is something that is, again, another commonality, I believe. What do you have to say about this?
Yes, there's probably a minority of near-death experiences, people having them, are given a choice about whether to return to their physical earthly body or to stay in that unearthly blissful realm, often called a heavenly realm, very aptly, because it's beautiful, gorgeous, Susie. So in the minority of times that people have that choice, like you did, it's interesting that the substantial majority of the time, when people are in that unearthly, beautiful realm, feeling overwhelming sense of peace, love, and often a deep sense that this is their real home. So not surprisingly, the significant majority of near-death experiencers that are given a choice, at least initially, choose not to return to the earthly body, not to return to their earthly life. they want to stay in that area where they feel that overwhelming sense of peace, love, all those miseries, literally often the pain of that accident or illness that nearly killed them is completely gone. So not surprisingly, they want to stay. Now, ultimately, when that decision is made, or if they ultimately, and typically when they are given a choice, there's often a dialogue, often with other beings there. And so ultimately they do make the choice. And most commonly, just like you, Susie, that one of the most common reasons that people return to their earthly life is for family members, especially children. So that's the one thing that seems to be common. Now you can imagine the friends, family, and loved ones of those that didn't want to return to their earthly life after they come back. Well, that's you can certainly imagine their shock and concern, and yet that's the norm. And it's hard for those of us in our earthly lives to realize just how unbelievably connecting, compelling, important it is to have that that feeling, that sense of connection, that sense of belonging in that unearthly realm.
Because when we are on the earth, living our lives day to day, going around doing our food shopping or whatever it is, everything seems very real and very concrete and very, like, it's hard to imagine what happens with consciousness outside of this very material realm. And one of the things that I've come back with, if you like, is a new view. I put it in terms of having a new operating software. When I went up and came down, it was like I got an upgrade of my psyche and my perception and my filters. So I do see the world very differently now. And I feel like you mentioned about special knowledge. I certainly feel like I've come back with new information. I was always quite a spiritual soul. I was into meditation. I was into a lot of these things of connecting with this bigger force than ourselves. But I've definitely come back with a sense of heightened understanding about things and people and love and, this universal concept. What have you found in your studies?
Yeah, Susie, that's absolutely common after people have a near-death experience. Now, just because it's common, I don't want people to think it's not extraordinarily special and meaningful, as you know. But it's one of those after effects we commonly see. People are more loving. I think they're more attuned to other people as a result of that increased sense of love and compassion they have. So I think they're literally more aware of people. I think that probably has some significant part of why they tend to be more intuitive, if you will. It's just that increased level of awareness. So we see that a lot in people that have near-death experiences, after effects. But these people are often more loving. They value loving interactions and relationships. And people, as a result of a near-death experience, will often leave an unloving relationship and just go seek out a relationship where it's more loving, where that value that they've learned during their near-death experience can be expressed. They may leave unloving jobs where they have to, day to day, as part of their job, act in ways that are unloving towards other people. It's not unusual. People will quit those jobs and say, forget it, this isn't what I want to do. It's not unusual for people that have near-death experiences that ultimately end the healing professions. There's quite a few nurses that have had near-death experiences, social workers, even physicians. So people after a near-death experience may be a little bit more predisposed to seek out a profession in which they can reach out to others in the world with love and compassion at a level that was not nearly as important to them before.
I've certainly had a change in my friendship groups, my communities, where I'm willing to hang out and where I'm not comfortable and I would just leave, for example. So I definitely have a different approach to who I share my time with and share my space with, which is great. But and then one other thing, another thing I wanted to talk about was, I found it very hard to integrate back into life after this. I came back as a new person, but everything looked the same. I looked the same kind of person. I had the same name, had the same kind of face. So people said, "Oh, that's Susie. I know who she is." And I thought, well, they don't really, because I'm not actually, I'm a completely different person to the one you used to know. So I found the integration process back into life extremely difficult. And I felt I had to do it on my own. I couldn't really talk to anyone about it. We were in lockdown, so the whole world was gone and all the normal social things had gone. So it was a tough time, Jeffrey.
Oh, I can understand that. My heart goes out to you with that integration issue. So it's like join the club. I hear that over and over from people that had near-death experiences. Any kind of change in your life, even if it's a very positive change, is often difficult. And so that, especially with near-death experiencers, where it can be a fairly radical change in their views. I mean, all of a sudden, they wondered if there was an afterlife. Now they know. They sort of, tried to be loving and compassionate in their life. Now they realize, wow, that seems to be much more important than I ever thought. The concept of we're in a life-threatening situation, you won, and it's there's so many things that go on that can make it difficult. And you're right, it's hard to talk to people. There's a lot of near-death experience groups, thank goodness, here in the United States, and that I've participated in them obviously a lot in years gone by, and that is extremely helpful for people to be in a large, especially a decent sized group where others have had near-death experiences. They can share without anybody thinking they're nuts, and they can share in a group where they're open and aware and understand, because they've heard this from many other people. I wish we could do that for everybody, but we can't, especially when you live on an island. There's probably not going to be a near-death experience group. So
well,
it's tough.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, friends who've had addictions, for example, and there's some amazing support groups around the world. Wherever you go around the world, there's going to be a support group for you. And it has never occurred to me to try and find a group to find my tribe, to be able to talk about this and relate to this and empathize and discuss and not feel like a weirdo. It has not occurred to me. So I'm going to look for that.
I have a recommendation.
Please.
For those like you, Susie, or others that want to seek out a group, an online group, which is very, very powerful. There's an organization called IANDS, IANDS.org, IANDS.org. If you go there, you can find, and you have to look around the busy homepage that they have. But if you do, you can find that they have a lot of online groups, and those can be very effective. They can be some very good people talking, lots of other people that had near-death experiences. So literally at this point, anywhere in the world, you can join, and they have several different groups. You can sort of pick and choose what group would be best for you. So IANDS.org, great resource for finding online groups that meet regularly.
Jeffrey, great steer. Thank you. I'll put that in the episode notes as well. Let's talk about the light. So one of the things that you mentioned is people have, I had it too, but I can hardly remember it. But I remember telling the story that when I came back in, there was a big flash of bright light. Tell me what you know about this. Well,
okay, you asked. Susie, you may be impressed to hear the following statistics. We had actually one researcher reviewed over 500 near-death experiences posted on the NDERF website. I reviewed like over 800 near-death experiences. And our goal was to use some of the new software we have that can see what word is used most commonly in describing what happened during a near-death experience. The number one word used by people that have near-death experiences to describe what happened to them is light. Mm-hmm. So number two is love, and number three is God, interestingly. Mm-hmm. And so as a result of that, obviously people describe light, as you know full well, Susie, this is we use a term light, but that's an earthly word for a very unearthly phenomena. It's light that can be, it may be described as bright. We've had one near-death experiencer say it was brilliant, like 1,000,000 times 1,000,000 suns, but it never hurts the eyes when you're having a near-death experience. It's not uncomfortable. It's just sort of radiant. We've got other people feel sort of a connection with that light. They may realize that light and love and God are sort of interconnected, and they're tightly interconnected. So that's very common that people describe that unearthly light, often very vivid, seems to be a very significant part of what's going on, very impressive given its unearthly nature. So join the club, Susie. There's a lot of other people that have, seen that very remarkable light. And again, a very positive part of a near-death experience.
Incredible. And with this, and this tunnel idea, the idea of a tunnel, this comes up quite a lot. And I kind of I had a sense of that. I had a sense of white light and a tunnel. What do we know about this?
Yeah, it's not everyone has a tunnel experience. It's maybe about a fourth of people or so. But those that do have a tunnel experience during their near-death experience describe typically as moving through a tunnel. It may be slow, but it's more often fast. The tunnel is variably described in terms of its color, configuration, whether there's anything visible going through it or along the side of the tunnel. So while they're going through the tunnel, often at the end of the tunnel is that white, unearthly, mystical light. I want to emphasize for those that have claustrophobia, never does people have any sense of claustrophobia or fear of close spaces while they're in the tunnel. So they're typically moving, and often as they get closer to that often described unearthly, brilliant white light at the end of the tunnel, they increasingly feel, and then often that's an entryway into that unearthly, or if you will, heavenly realm. But as they're going through the tunnel, they often feel more and more connected toward that light. They feel it's very positive. They're feeling like they're very glad to be moving in that direction, and they really have that sense of wanting to get closer and closer and even be into that light. Is fairly commonly described in tunnel experiences.
So following all this amazing work you've done in the area, why do you think this phenomenon happens? What benefits, other than the ones we've described and greater connection, why does it happen this way, do you think?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I've been studying this for over 20 years. Consciousness that is immaterial, not part of the physical brain, consciousness clearly separates from the physical body when it should be impossible. Like under general anesthesia and your heart stops, it's doubly impossible for the physical brain to account for any of the consciousness apart from the body. The multiple lines of evidence all are completely incompatible with the physical brain function as we know, or as even is possible to account for these experiences. So from my perspective, I think this is, if you will, what some people conceptualize as a soul. Now that's not a perfect word either, but it's clearly something that survives our physical bodily death. It's clearly who we are, all that we are, everything we are that can exist separate from physical brain function, separate from a functioning physical body. And it clearly seems to be, and over I hear this from people that have a near-death experience, get that unearthly soul consciousness. I use the term consciousness apart from the body in scientific gatherings, but it's probably even closer to soul as most people would conceptualize. It seems to be eternal, seems to be connected to and a part of that unearthly or heavenly realm. So I think it's a part of who we all are, but just sort of our eternal self. It's time, when it's time for our physical body to pass on, that's part of what the inspiring message of near-death experiences. We don't really die. We do have that afterlife, that soul, that existence that goes on forever in a world that is far more beautiful, far more wonderful than anything we could have on Earth.
Anything we can imagine. It is. I just love it. You said something very interesting earlier that I wanted to pick up on, which was when people lose their consciousness for an hour or so and come back. And so you mentioned the time aspect. Many people say to me, how long were you gone for? My answer is, I have no idea. So I'm wondering about that hour reference.
Sure. It's that was, that you can be, if you're clinically dead, if you've got your heart stopped or you're not breathing or both, usually, you really have like 7-8 minutes before you can get resuscitated, before you have some significant permanent brain damage. Now, on the other hand, people can have a severe trauma, accident, or illness like you, and can be unconscious, where there's no, and by the dictionary definition of unconscious, you're not conscious. You have no possibility of any kind of remembrance at that time because you're unconscious, and yet you do. It's called a near-death experience. So that can be, you can be unconscious and have a near-death experience. Can last minutes, hours, for some people that end up in an intensive care unit, days. So that period of unconsciousness can be very prolonged, at which time a near-death experience can occur. And yet when people have near-death experiences, very importantly, almost invariably, there's no sense of time. During the near-death experience, people typically say that either time doesn't exist or it's radically different from anything we know on Earth. So, one of the many lines of evidence that when you have a near-death experience, it's non-physical movement in a near-death experience, non-physical communication, typically telepathic, but beyond that, where you describe concepts, context, feelings that underlie it, far more than just the simple word telepathic would describe. So during a near-death experience, this is not a independently separate three-dimensional existence from what we know on Earth. It's a radically different environment, non-physical in every way. And as part of that, as far as getting back to your time thing, time during the near-death experience simply doesn't exist at all compared to earthly time. In fact, people have had near-death experiences where they're seemingly relative to earthly time. We're probably having that experience at least for many days, is what they believe.
Really? How interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like a lot happened when I was out, but I came back and it felt like nothing really had happened this end. It wasn't like people go, where did you go?
Yeah, it's a lot more interesting. Yeah, time's a lot different, as you know, Susie, from your own experience, and very dramatic. And that's almost uniformly near-death experiencers, especially the ones that have more detailed near-death experiences, describe that to a T. It's just, it's all a part of that concept that this is a radically different environment than our earthly life, and that's tough for people to understand. Even people that get consciousness when apart from the body, it's easy for them to believe that it's, well, isn't it a world like this earthly world? And the answer is no, it's not even close. It's radically different, completely. And that's part of what makes, of course, a near-death experience hard to share, because it's during a near-death experience, there's so many things that are over and over. You use the word unearthly because it's nothing that you've known in your earthly life, any of us have known. And literally, as you said, are beyond imagination.
It's beyond words, beyond imagination. Very hard to describe. I'm now faced as a writer also. I'm writing my story. It's quite hard. I find very easy to write about my life, and I've had an extraordinary life. But when I come to writing about this one, it's quite difficult. I'll tell you something I did today. I went to the hypnotist who kindly hypnotized me every day when I was going through my treatment in hospital. She's quite amazing. She's on the island. I went to her today because I said, could you regress me to go back into my near-death experience and slow it down so that I can view it again in more detail? So we're beginning to do this work now. I don't know if you've had anyone else do this kind of thing, but I worked with a couple of hypnotists for 10 or 12 years in my life, and teaching hypnosis to people in big conferences. So I had a background in hypnosis. I'm particularly fond of it as a method.
Well, it sounds with your background like hypnosis would be perfect. So that, certainly I've heard from many people that can help. You have to be cautious about having hypnosis create, if you will, false memories or some distortion. But with your background and your confidence in it, that's fantastic. It's not for the great majority of people that have a near-death experience don't undergo hypnosis, but certainly there are those just like you where it makes a lot of sense, and
it does.
You probably will.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 10 years going in and out of deep trance states, which would do interesting healing things. For example, people who had phobias or were bipolar and so on, really helpful in a healing sense. So I'm hoping, I'm doing it from a writer's perspective. I really want to get some good detail on and check my memories on this NDE, because the nature of my brain cancer did destroy a lot of my memory. And that was how actually I got diagnosed, because I couldn't remember where I parked my car. I couldn't remember different things. And even now I have, you know, an interesting memory that doesn't always serve me brilliantly. But I thought it's how fascinating to go back through that memory bank and go through the files of what happened in my brain and see what's there and investigate it. Another thing I want to, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
no, go.
jump in.
Yeah. Go.
Yeah, you said just for the viewing audience, it's not unusual at all for folks to have difficulty describing their experience in words. I mean, how do you describe something that's unearthly, beyond human language, in human words? And I hear that over and over from people that have tried to write their near-death experience. We ask a very direct survey question: was your experience difficult to describe in words? And about 3/4 of people say yes. That's especially true where they have more detailed near-death experiences. So good luck, Susie. It's a challenge to find the earthly words to best describe the unearthly experience. But you know, heck, what else you got to do?
Yeah, so, exactly. What else is there to do?
Yeah, how else you got to do it
on a weekend? When I did the questionnaire on your platform, and how many questions were there, Jeffrey? There?
Oh, geez, yeah, that's embarrassing.
About 40 or something?
No, quite a few more.
Yeah.
As far as all the possible check boxes and stuff. Yeah. It's over 100, so it's like over 100.
It didn't feel like that. I mean, I love answering a good old survey the best of times. So a survey from experts on NDE, I was there. You know, I was there, and I found it very interesting because answering some of those questions required me to go into a part of my memory of it that I had not accessed previously. They were really great questions, so I found myself being stretched to answer them correctly. But nevertheless stretched, but intrigued. So I found out stuff that I hadn't really thought about. And so I found it very illuminating. I may actually go back and redo those questions again to bring that front of mind. It leads me to another question, which is what types of people have this? Is there any, I know we've had kids and old people, and is there any kind of commonality of the kind of people that have these experiences?
Right. Some years ago, me and 2 other people reviewed all the near-death experience literature that we had. It was over 30 years of literature at that point in time. And I co-authored with my collaborators, a scholarly book chapter looking at that literature specifically to see if we could find any demographic variable, age, gender, prior belief system, education, anything that would correlate with either them having a probability of having a near-death experience when they nearly die, or when they have a near-death experience, what the content of the near-death experience would be. So I can tell you, with our very detailed search of literature, to our surprise, we found absolutely no correlate with any demographic variable. Near-death experiences can occur in the very young and the very old. Near-death experiences occur in men, women. It doesn't make any difference what their prior, for example, religious belief is or lack of religious belief. Atheists have typical near-death experiences too. None of that seems to make any difference at all. In fact, with regard to religion, it seems to make absolutely no difference whatsoever, whether you say a Muslim in Egypt or a Hindu in India, a Christian in the United States, wherever on the planet you are, whatever your age, prior belief system, wherever you are in the world, the near-death experience seems to occur. When it does, the content is strikingly similar. There doesn't seem to be, it can be, I mean, like when you have a life review, you're going to see your life. When you encounter deceased loved ones, they're your deceased loved ones, not someone else. So there's a little bit of that in what you would expect of that commonality based on your prior life. But as far as the major elements, tunnel, light, having in general a life review, some of the major elements are what occurs during the near-death experience, strikingly similar with all those demographic backgrounds, and about either the probability of a near-death experience occurring or what its content is seems to be completely independent of any cultural predetermination.
Wonderful. So I'm going to share something with you that I don't normally, because I'm really engaged with our chat, and I love how clever you are about all and knowledgeable about all this. Before I had my NDE, I was in my hospital room and I was going in for the scanner, and I had a visitation from this golden, I call them angels, the golden sort of golden thing golden energy. And I was told in my mind's eye, or in my intuition, very clearly, I was going to have 3 scans. That's 4 fingers, three scans. One was very bad and it would be terrible. The second one, it would clear up and be improved. The third one, I'd be out scot-free. It would be healed. And I believed this, Jeffrey, so strongly that there was no error of possibility that that wasn't the case. And I was also told, because I'm a writer, I'm going to write a book to inspire millions of people about the trip that this journey. So I kind of knew that was the shape of the story before any of it happened, before the NDE, before the scans or anything. I knew that my scans were going to be in that order, and that's how it panned out as it happened. But it was like I was told this, I got the storyline before it had actually happened. Is this a familiar thing? Has this happened to other people?
Yeah, this would be under the general category of psi premonitions, in other words, awareness of future events. Notably, you weren't having your near-death experience at that time. That seemed to be that energy, that golden energy. Angel is a very popular word used, best human word, I guess. So that's very unusual to have premonitions or awareness of the future. But we do see that in near-death experiences. It's not rare, it's just uncommon. And whenever people have those premonitions associated with their near-death experience or life-threatening event, almost invariably, just like you, Susie, it turns out to be true. So it's fascinating that happened. And, certainly, obviously very reassuring to you, but it looks like somebody, you have friends in high places.
Yeah, I do.
Like that. So that would be,
and they're very beautiful.
That's one way to look at it.
They're very beautiful friends, and thank goodness for that.
Yes,
it
thank you.
Allowed me to go through the process with a big heart, without the fear.
Yes.
Jeffrey, how absolutely wonderful. I have loved talking to you, and it's been a joy. Obviously, this is a subject very close to my heart and my personal journey. And I really hope, my intention is that many other people who've also going through this or gone through this or will go through this can get really good nuggets from our chat.
I'm sure that these are fantastic questions. And I want to jump in immediately and thank you so much, Susie, for sharing your near-death experience. Even though over 3,500 people have shared, every near-death experience is important and valuable. We learn more with each and every person that shares, just like you, and it really makes a difference. So thank you. Your near-death experience you shared with NDERF and then we shared with the world is going to be informative and inspirational to a vast number of people around the world.
Fantastic. Would you say about your platform so people know where to find it?
Sure. It's the term NDERF refers to my Near-Death Experience Research Foundation website. URL, as you found it, Susie, is NDERF.org. NDERF.org.
Fabulous. And people can go there and get great resources. One final question, Jeffrey, that I would love to ask before you go. What's next? Having done all of this work, where are you headed next with this?
Oh, wow. That's a great and timely question. I retired after December 31st after over 35 years of medical practice. So I have more time than ever to devote to this research. In fact, it's kind of amazing. I got as much done when I was so dang busy in my medical practice. So I'm definitely going to be doing more research. I'm going to look more into these issues of an afterlife because I think near-death experiences provide, if you will, a portal into understanding what lies beyond death's door, and it's extremely good news. So we're going to continue to do a lot more near-death experience research. And we'll be sharing it with the world. I'm working with others on a collaborative effort more than ever. And so it's just an exciting and very positive time of my newly retired life to have more time than ever to share with the world this important research that's coming out. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So it's my second life now after my medical life, if you will. So that's what I'll be up to.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for the work that you do. It helps so many people and it's so fascinating and wonderful. And we're so grateful for everything that you do in this area. And I certainly will be looking out for what goes on from here. We can only get more and more interesting as things evolve. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your energy and showing up for this amazing subject. Thank you, and lovely to talk to you. And I hope our paths will cross again for sure.
Thank you, Susie. We'll keep in touch. Great questions, and really enjoyed this discussion today.
Me too. Thank you.
You bet.